This is the best way to order your nodes, especially if you want to keep your colors. There's a lot of ways to do things in Resolve, but here's why I think this is the way you should order your nodes, especially for balancing and especially for footage that wasn't properly white balanced before. We are color managing in nodes. We have our S-Log3 color space transform going into Davinci Wide Gamut and then going out to Rec 709 2.2. So first thing we probably would do is put a little bit of contrast. I'm going to pull the shadows down a bit just so we can see the image a little bit better. And if you look at the vector scope, we can see we have that blue magenta push because the footage wasn't white balanced properly. What I've been seeing before and my node structure that was being used before was to have balancing done after the exposure node. So I'm going to grab this white point here and this is what I'm going to balance. This is what I'm going to use for reference. So I'm going to use my offset wheel. I'm just going to bring that into the ballpark and then I'm going to use my printer light keys to dial in the rest of the balance that I want to do for here. And they're all within like 1 point of each other. All right, so that's our post balance. So what happens when further down the line or further down the grade, you want to change this exposure? If you change the exposure, look what happens to the vector scope. But this actually happened on a project that I color graded recently. And whenever I had to change the exposure, I had to change the color. And that's because my node structure was like this, where the balance was after the exposure node. So whenever you move that exposure, the colors change, especially when you expose positively. Now, let me show you what happens when you balance before the node. I'm not going to change the exposure. I'm just going to pull this balance out of the node tree. I'm going to drop this one in. This is the pre-balance node. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to look at my vector scope. And I'm going to pull this in. Use my printer lights again to get my white balance. Remember, this is just a reference balance. The rest of the image is not necessarily balanced, so to speak, but I just want to use this white point as reference because we can see the difference here. All right, so that's the balance that we have. And let's take a look at the vector scope again. That's what we have. Now, if we move the exposure in this node tree structure, that vector scope is pinned at the center. And just to prove it even more, let's check the balance between the signals. All the same. If we pull this down again, they're all balanced. They're all the same. All around this, within the margin of error of like 1 or so. All the same. Okay, I'm going to put this back in the node tree. I'm going to disable the pre-balance node. I'm going to put the post-balance node back in the tree. Right? So even if I go and balance this node again, this post-balance node, if I balance it again, using my printer lights again to and take a look at the vector scope, it's going wild. Especially when you go up, when you expose up, it goes wild. Let me show you one more thing though. If I take this node 3 or disable this node and go back to the pre-balance node, and look, it's still balanced. With all the exposure changes that have been made, it's still balanced. And this is why I believe this is the best way to order your nodes, especially if you want to keep your colors, especially for footage where it wasn't properly balanced before, like S-Log3 footage or Rec 709 footage or anything that's not raw, right? But even raw footage, like, it's just an easier way to not having to worry about the color once it's balanced. Yeah, that's what I think anyway. Let me know. All right.